Hi and welcome to the LSEG developer community. Today we're going to be looking at the LSEG data library for Python tutorial, and specifically we're going to be looking at the news module. So here in the past we've spoken about LSEG data platform, and this is the platform on which lives our APIs. Now these are the APIs specifically for that platform. If you're looking for other APIs that do not live on that platform, you have to look elsewhere. But what we're doing here is that we're looking at these APIs that live on that platform, and you can see at the bottom with these three dots, there's quite an awful lot more than just 6. I'm just showing them as a way to exemplify the way the platform works. And within these APIs, you have several endpoints. And what we're doing here with the LSEG data library for Python is that we've created these functions for you to be able to direct your requests to these endpoints so that you don't have to learn these random endpoints, these addresses by heart. And this is what's going on right here. You can go through get data and get history. These are functions inside the access layer, which are considered to be more rudimentary layer of the Python library, or the contents layer, which normally are made of modules. So here you've got content.pricing. You see content is a module, and you've got these modules right there. And then the delivery layer, especially with that endpoint request function that allows you to direct your requests to these endpoints. But you have to know the name of the endpoints in order to use that. But we're going to stick with the access layer today, specifically the news module. Now, normally in the access layer, you've got functions. Get history is just a function, get data is just a function. But today, news is a module in which you've got these two functions. You've got the get headlines and get story. If you'd like to know more about these endpoints, because I say there's more than just 6, indeed there are. If you go to go on developers.lseg.com, here at the top right in developer tools, you can go to API Playground and you'll see all of the endpoints right there. I'm not going to click on it because it's going to log me out of workspace on which I am logged in right now in order to use the desktop session. So without further ado, let's import our libraries and then I'll speak about the desktop session. So here we've got our date time, which we're importing in order to use time delta, which we're using to modify time. So we're going to say from, 3 years ago to 4 days ago in order to know exactly what 4 days ago was. What was that date? We're going to be using this function time delta. IPython is there to display so that we can actually show the news that's going to come out of the new get news function. And it's going to be in HTML code. HTML code is not very easy for us humans to read. Instead, we're going to be converting it to something that's easy to read, easy on the eyes for us. Pandas is a famous data frame libraries within Python, and we are going to be using this specific max column width so that we can see many characters within each column. Otherwise, it's going to be quite compressed a bit too much. Without further ado, we're going to be using the access layer, just like I said, and the desktop session, just like I said. In the desktop session, allows us to authenticate ourselves to the LSEG services here with this ld.open session function, whilst we have our workspace desktop application running on the same machine where we are running our code. So here I'm importing my LSEG data library right here, and I'm calling it LD, and I'm opening my session with this function right here. And if we put nothing in there, it defaults to the desktop session. You can see here that it is the workspace session because I've got my workspace application running on my machine. I don't have to put in my password or my details or anything like this. The reason being, I've already done this to log into my application. That's what's going on right here. Let's get ahead to our function, shall we? So today we're going to be looking at get headlines. It's going to be quite a short and sweet introduction here because there isn't much to say. I'm going to be adding a little twist you'll see in a second. But to start with, let's have a look at the parameters, the arguments we can use inside that get headlines function. You see we got our query, our count, so we can say that the maximum requests or results we want from that function, start and end, dates, and order by. I'm not going to be using that, but I just wanted to show you very quickly how you can find information about all these things with this help function at the start right here. You can use your function get headlines to query data. So here we've got our LSEG RIC, lseg.l, that's the identifier code for the company LSEG, London Stock Exchange Group. And we're going to be starting our query in 2024, so just a few months back, and then all the way down to 4 days ago. So that's what we're using the time delta for. You see, it's in order to say that we're querying up to 4 days ago. Here we're only just going to collect the first 3 just as a showcase. I'm just showing very quickly what can come out of it. And as you can see here, that's what comes out. We've got our headline, we've got our story ID and our source code. Now, what's the story ID? What's this any use for? Well, you can use the get story function to get the entire piece of news, not just the headline, out of it. So here, if I was to do, here is my data frame. Let's run everything. So here I'm going to do kernel, restart kernel, and run it up to selected cell. Got to be doing this, and we're going to be getting our there you go. We're going to be getting our data frame, the news df right here. And here, what I'm doing with the square brackets is a functionality within pandas for my data frame. I am going to say, oh, there it goes, running the code. I'm going to say that I'm going to be looking specifically only just at the story ID column. So here I've got my story ID right there. It's the 0, 1 is the first column right here, because remember, it's 0 index, it's not 1 to 2, it's 0, 1. And if I was to look at this here, if I was to remove that, Control X, Shift Enter, I'm going to be running this, and I can see my story ID right there. So if I was to do square brackets and then put in the string for the name of that column right here, I'm going to copy, paste, run this. It's going to give me just that column. Now this is still a pandas object. You have your index right here, and that's why it's a pandas object. And what I'd like to do is just have the values. So if I was to do what we've got right there, dot values, I'm going to get an array. And this array is not like a pandas object, or not as such. You can think of it just as a list. And here I'm going to be selecting my 0th element within my list, and that's going to be my news story ID. And I'm going to be using my get story in order to get that entire news piece. So inside my LSEG data library, I've got my news module, and I've got my get story function. And here I'm going to be using that ID, as you can see right here. And the format is going to be in HTML. Now, I think that by default it's HTML, and that's the one you should really go for. And this is what I was talking about before when I say that we are going to be using the HTML function we imported above in order to see the story with our own eyes instead of seeing some HTML code. So let's run this one, and we're going to see the code. I prefer running cells live if I can during these demos. And as you can see, there is quite an awful lot. If you looked at that little bar to the right, there's quite a lot to show. This is a big piece of news, and it has quite a lot in there. It's got some tables, and as you can see that they can be highlighted with your mouse. It's all interactive because it's HTML code, so it's interactive if it needs be. Sometimes there are even some graphs, and you also have some links. Sometimes there are even hyperlinks, things like that. I mean, you have the entirety of HTML capabilities at your fingertips. Here, this was HTML. However, if you want to do maybe text analysis or something like this, you can just output it as text. And that's what we've got right here. We've got our text piece. Instead of it being tables and HTML stuff, you've just got the text. And sometimes you even have a bit more data because all the metadata might be hidden in HTML, and it will just be shown in text. Now, that's actually everything. And there isn't much to show apart from the platform session I'll be showing you in a second. So instead, what I wanted to do is give you a very quick glimpse of the stuff you could do with this, because it's actually extremely powerful. Here, what I'm doing is I'm going to be stealing shamelessly from my colleague who wrote an article of the news sentiment analysis. It's using the icon data API, but you can use it as I'm showing right there. And he speaks about how one could use the News Monitor app in order to get the query that you could put inside of the headlines function. So if I was to go in there and have a look at this query here, I'll be able to get some very specific data out. So here what I'm doing is I'm importing NumPy as NP, so I'm calling it NP. NumPy is a library that's used for mathematics usually, so logarithms or exponential stuff, or maybe smoothing average and stuff like this. Beautiful Soup is something that we're going to be using to kind of convert the HTML code or the news that we get into something that can be used into natural language processing. So we're going to be using some very light NLP here. Same with TextBlob. Again, we're going to be converting the data in such a way that it can be ingested for NLP. Date time is similar to what we were doing before in order to manipulate time, to go 4 days ago, a year ago, what is that? So it's done automatically. Date time, we're going to be importing time again to manipulate time in that fashion. We're going to be ignoring warnings for now because the NLP can actually come up with quite a few warnings, and we're going to be looping, so we're going to see them coming in a loop. You might have to import LXML. You might not have to, but here I would just like to inform you of this if you run into some issues on your end. And here we're going to be using the get headline function that we saw above. However, you can see that with this some kind of like, I don't know, nomenclature or grammar that seems to be specific to this this right here, but it's not. It's not specific to this. As a matter of fact, my colleague speaks about it right here, and he got this nomenclature from the News Monitor app. So if I was to go on the News Monitor app by just typing News Monitor, there you go. So I went on the 2.0, and right here, if I was to click escape, there you go. I can see this News Monitor app, and all I did, right, is I clicked. I went on there on the search bar at the top of the app, and I typed Apple space and Microsoft. There you go, and it's done it for me. And if I was to double click here, it's going to give me the kind of, I keep calling it nomenclature, but maybe the grammar or just the code that you can use to put right here in order to make it work. We're going to be starting a few years back in 2020 and ending just 4 days ago. This is our data frame right here. And as you can see, we've got our headlines and story ID just like we did before. And just for testing purposes, we're going to keep to the top 3 that we've got right here. And we're going to be looping through this. So what we've done is we had our data frame. Again, we've just got the top 3 for example purposes. And we have our columns. And what we're going to be doing here is that we're going to be adding a polarity column. Is going to be full of NaN, so it's going to be empty basically, and we're going to be doing the same for subjectivity and score. So we're going to have a polarity, subjectivity, and score columns on the right here, and then we're going to be looping. So for index, comma story ID in enumerate, and we're going to be enumerating through the values. Remember what we did before with the values? We're just getting the values of our data frame instead of getting the pandas objects throughout. Basically, we just don't want the indices right there. However, note that we are using this for loop as if we had a zip in there. And that is what the enumerate does. The enumerate basically puts things into a zip. And the first element of that zip is going to be the index of whatever you are iterating through. And the second element of that enumerate is going to be the element itself, whatever it is that you're looping through. So you can think of it as a zip, and on the left, the first element would be range. So it's going to be ranging up until the limit of however many items you're looping through. And then the second piece on the right of the zip would be the actual items themselves. So here we're just looping through our values and IDX. So index, first of all, is going to be 0, then it's going to be 1, and then it's going to be 2, because we're going to be iterating through these 3 columns right here. And story ID is going to be our story ID, just like we saw. If I scroll back up, and by the way, I can just click here so that I can collapse that. It's going to be these. See, these story IDs. We're going to be iterating through them from that table right here. We're going to be iterating through them, getting the news. So here we're going to use the get story from the story ID. That's what we're doing right here. We're getting the news, and then if this function right here returns data, we're going to then go through this loop right there. Note that if no data is returned, it's not going to go through this loop. We are then going to convert the text in question with beautiful soup. And so we're going to call it soup and then send A for the text blob. Again, we're doing this in order to convert data in such a way that the function later on, the sentiment polarity and sentiment subjectivity can ingest that data. And we are going to add this sentiment polarity and sentiment subjectivity in the data frame that we've created. Now, remember that what we did here is that we created 3 empty columns. And the first column, the polarity column, we're going to pick that specific index. Remember that the iloc is a pandas function that allows you to pick the row in question. So here, .iloc, we're picking the row index. So we're picking that specific row. So out of the polarity column, pick the 0th index, then out of the polarity column, pick the first index and then the second index as we iterate through that loop. That's what's going on here. And for each one of these indices, for each one of these rows, we're going to be adding this polarity value right there. And we're going to be doing exactly the same thing here for subjectivity. And here, if the polarity is higher than 0.05, we're going to say it's positive. And if it is lower than minus 0.05, we're going to say that it is neutral or negative. No, sorry, if it's between minus 0.5 and 0.5, neutral, otherwise negative. And finally, we'll have the score right here, which we can add to our score column, which we've created right there. Again, it was an empty one, and row by row, we're going to be adding to this empty column the score that we've got. Let's have a look at the quick head. So I've already run all this because it can take quite a while. And I've got my index, which didn't change, right? It's the same index. So we can see the time at which these news came in, and we can have the polarity, subjectivity, and score. I've put a little piece of paragraph right there to explain what's happened here. It's kind of, I was about to say it's quite simple, but it's not, right? Because I've spoken for quite a while about a few lines of code. However, that's the thing. It's a few lines of code. This is extremely powerful. Out of this news function, we were able to get polarity, subjectivity, scores. I mean, you can loop through these things and get some extremely powerful insights with a very few lines of code. Here, there's only, was it 2 LSEG data library functions and only a few beautiful soup and text blob, right? The rest is just putting the data where you want it. This is so incredibly powerful, and you can get all of this quite quickly with a few lines of code using Python. All right, we're actually kind of done. The next thing is just I wanted to show you that you could do all of this using the platform session. So here what we're doing, instead of using the desktop session whereby you need the desktop application running on the same machine where you're running your code, here you only need the configuration file. So we've got it right here, and I'm letting my computer know via this function where my configuration file is, and I'm letting it know which the name of the session that I want to use, because I've got several in there. So I'm using the platform session, and I've named my specific session with my credential details like this, JL LDP for the LSEG data platform, right? And I've got it right here so that I can be authenticated to the services in exactly the same way that I was before with the desktop session. However, I just don't need the app running on my machine. And here, this is just a very simple news.getHeadlines function to show you that it works exactly in the same way. And I'm not going to be going through exactly all of the same functions we went through before, because you can do the same ones with the platform session. All right, as I said, this was short and sweet. I hope this was useful, and you saw the power that we can get out of just a few lines of code and a for loop. I'm sure that it will be of great use, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one. Thanks for watching.